This is pretty much a technology-proof business. It's inflation-proof, it's recession-proof, interest rate-proof.
You got into this coming out of COVID. You set the year one record for any franchise coming into our system. What was the mindset and how did you lean into such a fast start out of the gates?
Advice that I would give any of the franchise owners that are part of our system when they're getting started is...
That's a great point.
I didn't take a paycheck for 18 months because there's a lot of people that are like, I would never buy a franchise, royalties, yada, yada. Half of the reason that I'm in the franchise is for the playbook and the support that you can get with being part of a big brand. But what a lot of people take for granted is, there's 200 other franchise owners out there. And so what I try to tell anybody that's new to the system is don't put yourself on an island. The number one mistake that I've made over the time that we've been open is...
Welcome back to HUNKS Talking Junk Podcast, where we're talking all things leadership, branding, and culture. I'm here on the road today in Dallas, Texas, with our franchise owner from College HUNKS Talking Junk, Scott Leffel. Thanks for being here today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Honored.
So, Scott, you're one of the top franchise owners in our system, independent business owner, but as a franchisee, you're in business for yourself, not by yourself. So obviously, a lot of people in our system know who you are just because you've been putting up big numbers. Tell your journey a little bit. Where have you been professionally? What led you to wanting to own a franchise? And how did the College HUNKS franchise be the one that you ultimately decided to jump into?
I'm humble, so I don't know, saying like one of the top franchises, we have a lot of room to grow and a lot of room to improve, but I appreciate those kind words. But so what led me to College HUNKS originally? I was in corporate world, the restaurant delivery business sector. As a sales director, and the company that I was working for was going through a lot of turnover, a lot of changes. They were traded on the NASDAQ. The stock price was plummeting. And as a 50-year-old sales director in a tech environment, I saw the writing on the wall that I probably wasn't going to be there for long. And I was making really good money. And so I was like, I have to get into business for myself. I'd owned some different businesses in my past. So then I started just looking. I looked for over a year, probably went through 100 different business plans while I was looking, and I'd actually signed up with another franchise before College HUNKS, but they didn't do their onboarding until like March or April. And so just had some feelers out, but it was kind of like, this is where I'm going. And then College HUNKS came across my desk, and the name piqued my interest like it does for a lot of people. So, looked at it and then started, thinking about it. And the moving industry has been around since the beginning of time. At that point, COVID was going on. So as I did my research, it was a essential business. So I knew that we'd be able to weather, COVID. I was in the tech sector and realized the volatility of being in the tech sector. And this is pretty much a technology-proof business. It's inflation-proof. It's recession-proof, interest rate-proof, really. And so they just checked a lot of boxes. And then as I started to get to know people, through Brand Central and going through a lot of the validation calls, the feedback from all of the franchise owners was unbelievable. I'd owned a previous franchise in the past and had a pretty bad experience there. And so I kind of knew what to look for. And when I saw, the surveys that the franchise owners provide and the positivity, I was like, wow, that's amazing. One thing that's important, as a franchise owner, you have to make sure that you hitch your wagon to the right ownership group. And like the previous franchise that I was associated with, they were on their way out. And so they weren't reinvesting. And, this is stuff that I found out after the fact. And so I was like, holy smokes, like I'm in trouble because the they're on their way out, where we're on the way up. And so I would say those are the main points. Yeah. It checked all the boxes.
That's great. And let's talk about it just from a branding perspective. You mentioned the brand, spoke to you. I think, it'd be interesting to hear your perspective on that, right? Because, we're now, both of us, far beyond college, and you see a brand like College HUNKS and hauling junk and moving. Some people might actually be sort of turned off by that concept or have almost like their ego get in the way of wanting to own a brand that stands out like that. And I think back to when we started, we knew that the brand was a bit of a pattern interrupt. It's not what people associated with moving and hauling. So is that what you saw, or was it something?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. After I joined the brand, like some people, College HUNKS and, kind of tongue in cheek. But for me, like, I'm not the best person to ask that question because like I was looking at it more from the business perspective instead of the consumer perspective. And it just made like total sense for me. But I think, now that looking at it from both sides of the equation, the reality is, our name is a hard one to forget.
Yeah.
It can be a little bit of a tongue twister as you're kind of getting started with
Yeah.
it and
Yeah,
learning
I
how
would
to
say
let it roll off the tongue.
It kind of flies in the face of probably branding traditionalists, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a long name, College
Right.
HUNKS Hauling Junk, and then we added and
moving.
moving. It's like
Yeah.
batteries plus bulbs.
Yeah.
So it's probably the longest brand
Yeah.
name. People butcher it, but people think of it as the orange and green trucks,
Yeah.
the hunks,
Yeah.
and it becomes a conversation piece. What I've always
Absolutely.
said, it's like if people aren't asking questions about it or inquiring or interested or curious, then you don't have a brand that stands out. So to your point, that I think has worked in our favor.
Yeah, I think it's up to us to control the story and to make sure that we kind of move past what somebody's initial interpretation of it, that our guys are just in college and, that they're hunks, quote unquote.
Yep.
But once they see, how we present ourselves and, the procedures that we follow with, welcome calls, confirmation calls, or estimates, how we approach the jobs, then, they quickly realize that this isn't just, a part-time type business.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so, you talked about you did the diligence. You had some negative experiences owning franchises in the past. You got into this kind of coming out of COVID. Big market like Dallas. I remember talking to you in the early days. You set some very high standards and expectations and goals for yourself. We won't give the exact numbers, but you set the year one record for any franchise coming into our system. You just set another record here in your 5th year of business that prompted my visit to your team this morning, which was absolutely incredible. Talk about sort of the early years stepping into a business like this, a franchise system, kind of the mindset that you had to have to make sure, they say 4 out of 5 businesses fail in the first 5 years.
Yeah.
Now, franchising has a higher percentage of success, but even, the average franchise doesn't always make it to 5 years either. So what was the mindset and how did you lean into such a quick, fast start out of the gates?
Advice that I would give any of the franchise owners that are part of our system when they're getting started is, you have to, we go through the vision statement in our training and you got to think big. When we got started, my goal was never to be $1 million business. And so the mindset was, whether it comes to our marketing or whether it comes to training.
It was going to be more than that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we always had a lofty goals. And, let's just say on the marketing, like I didn't look at the marketing budget as where I am. I looked at it as where I want to be. And I think that's an important element. Like you have to treat this thing like it's a legitimate business and roll up your sleeves and be willing to grind. But my goal was never to do 500,000.
Yeah.
It just was never part of the plan.
Yeah. Yeah. And I can say, coming from your team meeting, we talked about, the goal here in the next 10 years to be a $40 million franchisee of a system, which is, pretty impressive. And to your point, somewhat of a scary goal to have, but it's continuing to set the bar high and then work towards making that happen. What were some of the early challenges that you faced? Coming into an industry that you hadn't directly had experience in, a franchise system where you're provided a playbook, but you still have to execute said playbook in a market where there wasn't as much brand awareness of College HUNKS relative to some other markets.
Trying to have the infrastructure and everything set up as far as where I want to be, but then at the same time managing where I'm at right now.
That's a great point.
Right.
The balance of where you're trying to get to with the reality of where you are.
Right. Yeah.
Currently.
And so, with my wife, I have to constantly, it goes in waves, right? And so we get to this point where, sales are good, profits are good, it's looking great, but then we reinvest. And so the profits might go down, but that's what's going to get us here, right? And then we get here. And so like with the wife, like, okay, this is good. I'm like, well, hey, honey, hey, man, we're going to take another dip to get up here. Yeah. And just trying to balance that as well with like the seasonality of the business. And so you got to be very strategic at looking at, when you're going to, add that manager, right? You can't, in our business, you can't, add that manager in March because they're not going to be ready for season. And so you've got to look at, I've got to add them in January, to get them spooled up. It takes at least, 3 to 6 months for people to get spooled up in this.
I remember, early on, you told me you weren't going to be pulling money out of the business. You had sort of budgeted personally to be able to, have a certain amount of, I guess, savings to be able to live off of while you were investing in growing the business. Yeah. That's a big leap of faith for anybody, especially, at our age to kind of bet on yourself, make a big investment, but also not have to pull money out to live. How did you juggle that while also, as you said, thinking about where am I going? You said you've got lofty goals of trying to grow to be a big multi-million-dollar operation.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't come into this without a plan. Once again, I think everybody is different as their financial situations and what they want to get out of this and, what their long-term vision is and things of that nature. But, I didn't take a paycheck for 18 months. Mm-hmm. And not everybody can do that. Luckily my wife worked, and so she was helping, pay the bills, and, we didn't live an extravagant lifestyle, but everything that we were doing for the first, year and a half was just putting it all right back into the business.
Yeah. You mentioned your wife a couple of times. I always say when somebody's looking at a business opportunity or a franchise opportunity, I call it the 4 Fs: fit, family, financial, and fun. Do you have a transferable fit, skill set, experience, family, spouse, parents? Are they going to be a support system for you, cheering you on versus saying, I told you not to do that? Financial is the amount you're looking to invest. Can it match your financial goals? And the fun or fulfillment factor. Can you have fun? Can you be fulfilled doing this? So you mentioned your wife a few times. What did she say when you brought this idea to her? How do you create that conversation piece where it's like, hey, I'm going all in on this business venture. And I need you to keep earning while I'm burning.
I don't know if she's going to listen to this podcast. But so we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary this year.
Congratulations.
So
you were at 25 years when you were buying the franchise.
Yeah. And I was making really good money in the previous job. And so when I approached her like, honey, I'm going to put in my resignation, she's like, are you crazy? And because she'd been there for the trials and tribulations of the previous franchise, which was really challenging. We made it through unscathed, but it was definitely a battle. I think we've been together long enough that she trusts me, and so I just had to kind of explain the why to her. Look, this is why we're doing this. Basically, where I'm at with life. It's like, honey, I was traditionally the primary breadwinner for our family. I'm like, look, we're going to take a short step backwards to take 3 steps forwards. And I think she's, been with me long enough that she knows, once I put my mind to something, it's failure just isn't an option. Yeah. It's just not even.
That's amazing.
We're going to figure it out.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about the financial and the big financial goals, the investment. We talked about family. Yep. What was it about, sort of the fit and the fulfillment factor or the fun factor for you that you've maybe found in being a business owner and then in particular, a business owner in this franchise, but really a business owner in general? Yeah.
Well, I would say unique to this brand, when I first got started, I wouldn't have got into it if I didn't think it was going to meet the financial expectations of the family, under no uncertain terms. That just wasn't going to happen. When we look at our purpose, move the world, and we look at, our core values, and we look at, what we do to, give back, 2 meals to U.S. Hunger for every job that we do, the donations to people in need with the items that come off of our junk trucks, and then free moves for victims of domestic violence. In my location, we've probably helped 50 domestic violence victims in the time that we've been open. Those are the things that wasn't why I got in the business to get started. But, the reality is with some of the things that we do, and when you see the impact that it has on the clients and, literally, you move a victim for domestic violence, and they're just crying the whole time because they just can't believe, people that they didn't even know are coming in and helping them, get out of a terrible situation, and so those are the things that, really motivate. And then as well, you were with the team today and, I see this opportunity as, an opportunity to try to provide more opportunities for others, really buying into the building leaders, value. And it's not something that we take for granted. And so we're always trying to get guys to level up and see that, there's a plan for you. Yeah. You can grow.
Yeah, it was clear talking to your team this morning. They're locked in. They believe in the core values. They believe in the company purpose. we always like to say our goal is to have the values and the purpose shared by all, not just with all. And I always say it's not what's on the walls, it's what's on the in the halls and in the homes, the behaviors that are exhibited, not just a shiny poster or a core value flyer. And it was, clear that you've done a good job of instilling those elements, those foundational elements in your guys. And also, interestingly enough, when I asked who was here for the first year of the business, no one in the room raised their hand. So it was a relatively new crop of guys. Yeah. It reminds me of the Nick Saban interview I saw where somebody asked him, how do you keep winning championships at Alabama? And he says, well, the names on the jerseys may change, but at Alabama football, the culture and the identity stays the same. So you've been able to do that in a short amount of time. Talk about from a leadership standpoint, how you've been able to instill that. A lot of this frontline labor, people might dismiss as, blue collar, or people might, write off this generation as being lazy. But you've been able to recruit and train a group of individuals that believes in the purpose and the values of the organization and goes out and delivers a great service which shows in the numbers as well. So talk about your approach to leadership and how you've been able to do that over the 5 years that you've been in business.
Yeah, well, I'd say a couple things. So one, I would say, I got to give a huge shout out to Devontae Smith. He's my operations manager, and he's been in his role for a couple years now. And when he got into his role, we were going through a lot of churn prior to him coming into the role. And so I tasked him with look, the first thing that I need you to help us with here is getting the culture in line, because we'd gone through some different management turnover in the past and some people that were the wrong leaders for the business. And so he's done a tremendous job. And so now, even though he's only been in his role for a couple of years, I'd say 60% of our staff has been with us for over a year.
Wow.
So he really did a good job of turning that around. And how did we do it? Simon Sinek, I'm sure I know you're familiar with him, but, we really try to talk about the why. What's the why? What are we trying to do here? Yes, we're a junk hauling and a moving business, but that's not, really what we're about. It's back to the move the world. It's about it being great. It's about, seizing the day.
Yeah.
And so that's what we really try to preach with the guys, so that they know, this is just a junk and moving business if you make it a junk and moving business, right? But it should be more than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think, and that is what as I've become a student of entrepreneurship, and I would say I've been practicing entrepreneurship for 20 years. I don't know that we ever truly master it, but those are the consistent elements that I see, right? It's casting a long-term vision, which you've done. It's having a true foundational element of why we're here, who we want in our organization to represent the why and help us get there. And I always say the how is an acronym, help others win. And you've done that in your organization and here in the community. So it's fun to see that continue to flourish. The other thing I wanted to touch on, I hear a lot of people ask me, hey, what makes a successful franchise owner in your system? And my answer is always, you've got to be engaged with the brand and the franchisees in the system as well as the franchisor. You've got to be persistent and resilient, willing not to give up. You got to follow the system in the playbook, and you have to view the leadership challenges as a blessing, not a burden. And I think if a franchise owner or business owner in general does those four things, they can be successful. You've kind of taken it a step further. You've been part of the Franchise Advisory Council, which is a volunteer, a part of our franchise system to help be a voice and a communication channel for the franchisees and the franchisor. You've been a leader, a thought leader. Talk about kind of your engagement in the franchise system. Why you participate in the Franchise Advisory Council, how important that has been for the system, but also valuable for you as an owner to help elevate your business as well.
Yeah, good question. I'd say two things when it comes to the involvement in the system and why do you buy a franchise in the first place, right? Because there's a lot of people that are like, I would never buy a franchise, royalties, yada, yada. Half of the reason that I'm in the franchise is for the playbook and the support system and the fact that, we do have, leaders that are visionaries as far as where we can go and the support that you can get, with being part of a big brand. But what a lot of people take for granted is, there's 200 other franchise owners out there. And so what I try to tell anybody that's new to the system is don't put yourself on an island. So we've got corporate Brand Central that sees things from Brand Central's perspective, but then we also have the franchise owners. And when you combine both of those things, then that's what can really help, propel you forward.
Yeah. Well, no, I would say you're in business for yourself, not by yourself. That's kind of the old cliche of franchising.
And the other thing, as far as why part of the franchise advisory committee or why, try to help with pilot things. And that's selfish. I'm going to be honest, because like at the end of the day, I want to be able to have an impact on the organization that I've hitched my wagon to.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like I'm all in on this thing.
Right.
Like failure is not an option.
Yep.
And so if there's an opportunity for me to somehow provide feedback on, what a day in the life as a franchise owner is like, or, testing something for the brand, like I'm absolutely doing it because it's important for my success.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? The being a business owner in general, it can be a lonely proposition, right? There's not a lot of people you can talk to about what you're going through, and that's why I'm such a big advocate of peer groups and surrounding yourself with other people that are kind of going through a similar experience or journey. And that's what I think also you've leaned into on the franchise side by being part of the Franchise Advisory Council, to your point, connecting with the other franchise owners that have been around longer. I think I remember when you first joined, you were very intentional about visiting franchises, calling franchisees. Now you're actually a host to certified training location for newer franchisees. So, again, you took it upon yourself to do those things, which I think is critical in business ownership, taking that initiative. Yeah,
well, and I think as well, back to kind of like why not, obviously this isn't a sales podcast for College HUNKS, but, this is something that would apply to anybody that's looking at as a franchise. What are some of the benefits other than just, the playbook and the support system from Brand Central, and then also that franchise community. But, most people should have some sort of an exit plan on what they want to do. And, for me, I don't personally have an exit plan. Like, why sell, right? But when you're a sole proprietorship, like, if the owner at some point, you get big enough, obviously you're visionary for the brand. Like, you're not in the daily grind every day because, that's not where you should be, right? And so that's kind of what my vision is to get to the point that I don't have to be in the grind every day. But the problem, if it's a sole proprietorship, like when the owner tries to step away, and if they're the leader of the business, then most of the time those businesses go backwards. Yeah. And so now that you're trying to live off of, your residuals, let's say, of what this business has been doing, or try to sell. Well, now that you're not there, things start going backwards. Whereas if you're part of a franchise, and if it's a good franchise system, you always have that visionary that can come from Brand Central, and then you can support it with your local operations team, and you don't run the same risk of as you're trying to be more of just the visionary, that it's not going to go backwards. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why Nick Saban keeps popping into my head, but there's a lot of, I think, leadership similarities, and even sort of your disposition is similar. But he talks about complacency, and complacency leads to bad decisions. Yeah. Bad decisions lead to bad outcomes. He also talks about not accepting mediocre. Yeah. High achievers don't like being surrounded by mediocre. Yeah. Mediocre doesn't like being surrounded by high achievers. It makes them look bad. In the all staff earlier today with your team, you talked about being great. What does being great mean to you? And I think that's a great question to ask as a leader, and have your team reflecting and thinking upon that. Yeah. So how did you pick that as a term to bring into your organization and your franchise, and how do you help position this notion of greatness? Okay, here you go. You asked the question. So obviously we have the vision for the brand, right? Move the world. And so we support that absolutely. But we also wanted something, at a local level to get behind. And so within our leadership team, we were throwing out different ideas. And so once again, it kind of also gets back to building leaders and trying to help people reach their potential outside of College HUNKS, because most people don't envision themselves being a mover for the rest of their lives, right? So we try to preach to the guys is, success is a journey. Right. And I'm not successful. So obviously I've achieved some things, but it's a journey. I'm honored to be on this podcast, but I got a lot of room to grow. Right. So I'm definitely not a know-it-all. I'm still learning every day. Yeah. Which, by the way, is a sign of a great leader, because a great leader is humble, recognizes they don't know everything, that, leadership and learning go hand in hand. So. Well, I appreciate that. But being on this podcast, it does put a little bit of a target on my back, just to be hey, always know-it-all. I'm not a know-it-all, under no uncertain terms. I've definitely but I just try not to make the same mistake more than once. Right. Yeah. But back to be great. So what we try to preach to the guys, success is a journey, right? And success is different to every person, right? Somebody might be success is based on a monetary value. Success could be based on being a great father, being a great brother, giving back, charity. Like it's controlling time, right? It's different for everybody. But what I can say with confidence is, that journey from here to there, how long it's going to take can be shortened by making the right decisions, right? Every day we're faced with decisions, right? And a lot of this can apply to our guys because, are you going to show up in uniform or you're not going to show up in uniform? You know that you should show up in uniform. Yeah. But you might I'm not going to wear black pants today, right? I know that I should be here at 8 o'clock in the morning, but, 8:15 is close enough, right? And so what I try to tell them, or what we try to tell them is, if you want to minimize that time that it's going to take you to reach your success goal, well, if you continue to make the right decisions, then you're going to hopefully shorten that time span. And that's about be great. Yeah. So like when you're forced with the fork in the road, choose the right decision. Yep. And then we back it up with mind, body, spirit. Yeah. And so, what are you doing every day to put positivity into your mind? Are you reading books? Are you listening to podcasts? Who are you associating with? Like, what are you doing to develop your mind, your body? Are you staying hydrated? What are you eating? Are you watching your diet? Are you working out, right? You only got one body. Like, you better do the best you can with that one body. And then your spirit, whether you believe in, Christianity or whatever, like most people believe in a higher power in some sort, that there's right and there's wrong. And making those right decisions. And so that's what we try to say, like, be great. And so a lot of times, like when we leave a huddle or when guys go out on jobs, or even when we're talking about, an obstacle that we come across, it's like, be great. Yeah. And actually, we got these little wristbands that we wear. When we go through our orientation, we'll bring this up with our guys. And what we tell them is like, look, like you don't have, like you wearing this wristband isn't going to get you an extra shift. It's nothing about that. But like if you choose to wear the wristband, then not only are you going to look at it and hopefully a reminder to make the right decisions, but inevitably what's going to happen is somebody that is going to be like, hey, man, what's that on your wrist? Yep. And so then you have to be prepared to tell them what it is, and that's why we carry two, because the goal is to give one away. Oh, so I got goosebumps as you're telling that story because it's just such a perfect example, manifestation of our core values in action, company purpose in action, but also I think it's Tony Robbins that talks about sort of the phases of pattern development. It starts by being able to recognize patterns. Next, it's being able to imitate patterns, and then it's able to create patterns and put your own personal twist and spin on it. And that's what you've done in that greatness example, is you've taken the platform and the system of College HUNKS, which has building leaders as a core value, which has making an impact as a purpose, but then you've brought this notion of being great, which is your own personal value and something you developed with your team locally, and be able to weave that in as an ingredient and it's become part of your culture as it as it were. And so that is perfect example, microcosm of what being great is in business as well. The other thing that we've talked about a lot on this podcast is culture. And I always say, culture drives behavior, behavior drives results. You're having a lot of great results in the first 5 years of your business, multi-million-dollar franchise owner, expanded into larger part of the Dallas metro market. So how do you, as you grow, maintain that consistent culture, which ultimately drives to consistent service, which ultimately leads to a growing business and thriving business? I don't remember what the author of the book was, but there's a book, Change the Culture, Change the Game. And so what this author talks about, a lot of people, whether they're in business or whatever the case may be, when they want to change results, they focus on actions, right? And what this book is about, or what we try to do with our organization, is experiences lead to beliefs, and beliefs lead to actions, and actions lead to results. Love it. Yeah, and so it's kind of like, most people see the iceberg principle, and there's the 10, 20% above, but it's the 80% below that move the needle. And so that's where you want to constantly try to create experiences that create beliefs, and then that, so experiences. So hypothetically, like if you're not checking the trucks, like something as simple as checking the trucks, right? And so the trucks are dirty, right? And so then that creates a belief that it's okay for the trucks to be dirty, and then actions with trucks stay dirty, and results, dirty trucks versus experiences that when the team comes in, the trucks are always detailed, the blankets are folded, the inventory is there, like it's full of gas. Belief, like this is what it's supposed to look like, actions, results. Instead of just like, hey, who was on that truck last night? Why was this thing dirty? Like you're focusing on the action, you're not going to get consistent results.
Yeah, and those details add up, right?
Absolutely.
I think I read somewhere a quote. It was like little streams turn into big rivers, and that's ultimately the culture. And the culture you accept is louder than the culture you preach. Is another way I've heard it said. And so I think that what you're doing is incredible because you're not only preaching an incredible culture, you're living it, you're leading with it, and it's proving itself in the results of your business, which ultimately becomes that virtuous cycle of creating a greater impact for the people you hire, the community you service, and the financial rewards that you get to benefit from, as well as as an investor in the business, which I think is pretty incredible. What's been, I would say, some of the biggest challenges for you as a business owner or a franchise owner in general? Setbacks, lose sleep at night.
That's part of business ownership, right? Once again, just with our location, we do have new franchise owners that'll come through, or sometimes we'll do validation calls for the brand, and that's what I'd always try to tell people. Like, first thing I ever ask anybody that's new to the brand, or even if they're outside of the brand and they're looking to start their own business, it's like, have you ever are you a parent? And if they're, I'm a parent, I'm like, okay, well, that's similar to what you're going to go through as a business owner, right? Because your business is going to cry. It's going to keep you up at night. It wants money. There's also times that there's joyous events, and so, there's a lot of similarities there. But back to, your question as far as like the struggles or the learnings or things or the mistakes, I guess is what you're getting at is, like under no uncertain terms, you could ask anybody on my leadership team, because I'm very transparent on the biggest mistakes. Without question, the number one mistake that I've made over the time that we've been open is hiring leaders. Yeah, for sure. I believe in the building leaders' value so much that sometimes like I made the wrong decisions. And, just because somebody is a great, captain on a truck doesn't mean that they're going to be a great manager. That's one of the toughest things, I think, in business ownership, right, is being able to assess capacity of talent, not just assess talent, right? Because when you have a business that's going up and to the right, like yours is, like the brand is, you have to recognize we need, to your point, this balance of talent for today, but we also need to be thinking about the talent for tomorrow, and the talent at this level today may be at a ceiling of capacity. Now, we're going to do everything we can to break the glass ceiling, to stretch their potential, to help them be capable of elevating. But there's also this sort of decision tree point that you have to come up with, like, okay, well, actually, no, we need somebody that's been there before, a little bit higher level to lead to the next level. So if you look at the hiring process, right? So, how long is it going to take you to hire a leader, right? 3 weeks minimum, really, more like a month probably. So then you go through that process, then you onboard them and you get them integrated into the system. So how long is it going to take them to learn what we got going on? Depends on their background, but at least 3 months, right? And then from there, then how long is it going to take them to start, driving a program, right? Instead of just running shifts, right? So you probably got another 3 months there. Really, it's a 6-month process, right? So if you make the wrong decision, it's not just a 6-month setback, it's really a year setback.
Right, because you got to go do it again.
Exactly. And so that's something that, I don't have any silver bullets. We've just, we made some wrong. I'm in a great position right now, knock on wood. I have a great team now, but that's definitely been something that has set us back.
I heard a Steve Jobs podcast recently where he was saying that he spent 20% of his time recruiting, one day out of the week. And obviously Apple was a different type of rocket ship. But, being sort of maniacal about who we have in the organization, they've got to be great value fit, and they've got to have the potential and skill set and or performance threshold to be able to perform.
Exactly. And that would be like my second point, like as we've grown, and everybody goes through their different phases in the business. But let's say like when we started, we had one junk truck and one move truck, right? So launching trucks was pretty easy, right? And then you get to, that you're launching, over 15 trucks, it changes. And so the people that were on board, when we were not as busy, they didn't grow with the business. And like, okay, well, look, like now, because we have to park our trucks at a lot, not where we are located. And so it's like the leadership at that, as we grew, they weren't making the connection of like, look, we got to get, 40 guys out in under 30 minutes. So we need to be pulling those trucks over. Not only do we need to pull those trucks over, but then we also should do the truck checklist before they get here. We got to have the huddle ready to go, like all of these things. But, back to that leadership, so as we've grown, like some of the people, they just didn't see it. They were just like, well, this is how we've always done things. And it's like, yeah, but look, man, like we've got to get to here. And so how we did things, today or in the past, like we've got to evolve. Yeah. And, that's where I would get back to kind of like for the managers, what my expectation is, you're driving a program instead of running shifts. And so you've got to be proactive. You've got to be thinking about what's that next step. Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like growing a business is you're moving, if you're thinking about sports analogies, when you first start, you're the Pee-wee soccer team where everybody's chasing the ball wherever it is on the field. Then all of a sudden you're middle school, JV, varsity, college, and you become a pro team where you need a program of discipline and systems and leadership in that program. And then your recruiting looks different, right? Like when you're a Pee-wee soccer team, you take anybody who signs up. When you're middle school, you might have an A team and a B team. Right. When you're varsity, you got varsity JV, but then you're bench warmers and starters. But when you start becoming an elite college program or professional sports team, you need the best of the best. And unlike sports, we don't get to evaluate their game film, right? When we look at a resume, and a lot of times, resumes, of course, are somewhat sort of masking mishaps or mistakes. You can use all the personality profiling and interview techniques, but you still don't really know how they're going to lead. So that's why I think having a system for that is critical. There's a book that we read called The Who that I'm a big fan of, where it's about creating a scorecard for the role. It's about digging deeply into their past experiences and performances, doing reference checks, using the personality profiles. And now I think you can leverage in some ChatGPT comparatives to help you identify maybe some blind spots that you're missing in the interview process, because it's hard to do the litmus thumb in the air test if I like the guy or don't like the guy. There's a lot of nice people that come and interview, but can they really perform on the field or perform as a leader with the clipboard and the headset? Yeah, well, and that's what I would say, because once again, this podcast isn't just designed to the College HUNKS, audience, our franchise owners, but to people outside. And once again, like I'm still learning myself, but that's one thing. Like I would say to anybody that's starting their business is having that. You have to be ready for those tough conversations, because the team that got you started might not be the team that's going to get you to that next level. And it doesn't mean that they're not a great person. Yeah. It doesn't mean that they haven't, been an incredible asset. And so like what we try to do is, we follow EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. And so right person, right seat. And so, they get it, want it, and the capacity to do it. And so it's like, look, you get it, you want it, but like right now you just don't have the capacity to do it. Yeah. And so like, and the way that I try to balance things is like, look, man, like, yes, I'm the owner of this company, but I have a responsibility to everybody that works for me. Yeah. That we're providing opportunities for them as well. And so if we don't have the right leadership in place, it's not only setting me back, but it's not providing opportunities for others. Yeah, it's an art and a science, because you're betting your future, you're betting the team's future, the company's future, all on having the right people in the right seats. And you're doing yourself a disservice, the brand a disservice, your investment and your peers a disservice. And the person that's quite frankly struggling in the seat, 100%. They'd be better off either moving to a seat that's more of a better fit for them, or helping them find somewhere else where they could, be more fulfilled and effective professionally. I think we always have to give ourselves grace when we make mishires, right? Because you look at, again, the professional sports teams. They get the draft pick wrong all the time. They sign the wrong free agents. And again, they have the game film, the statistics, the data, analytics to try to make sure they're picking the absolute right players to put in the right positions on the field. And I think I saw a statistic that Fortune 500 companies only get the hiring right 6 out of 10 times. So, that's 60% feel a little better. Batting average. So you can feel good about, not feel good, but just give yourself grace when you make a mishire, and recognize that nobody's perfect in that regard. Yeah. So, wrapping up, I think, first of all, thanks for doing this. I think it's, the goal of this
podcast is to really bring leadership, branding, and culture insights to business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs, managers, really anybody that wants to help improve themselves and take it to the next level. I think you bring a unique perspective because you're an independent business owner that's been part of a franchise that's grown very quickly in 5 years, but also you have a prior corporate world experience. Last follow-up is really just any words of wisdom or advice you would have given to your, younger self, either when you were in the corporate world or when you were just getting started in this business, that if you know then you would have done differently or better, or it would have shortened the learning curve a little bit.
I probably don't have the right political answer for that because I think everything happens for a reason and everybody's got a different path. And like what we talked about earlier is, envy is you don't want to be envy, and I have obviously goals and aspirations, but I don't necessarily measure myself against other people. Yeah. Because that's that's not a good thing to do. And I think a lot of people that in life, they're always looking at the horizon, but the horizon is you're never going to hit the horizon, right? You got to don't be afraid to look back and where you've come. You just got to stay true to yourself and not be afraid to grind and work hard and, and just be thankful for where you're at and make the most of it.
Well, that's awesome. Well, Scott, I mean, you're a living example of the purpose, the culture, and the values that we espouse in our brand. I'm grateful to be considered yourself a partner and a friend. Yeah. Keep setting high goals, and I know that every time you set a goal, you say, I've got to fly out if you hit the goal, so I might as well get an apartment here in Dallas because I'm going to be back. I know it, and excited to see you continue to knock it out of the park, hit your $40 million business in the next 10 years, but more importantly, continue to make an incredible impact with the team members, your peers in the franchise system and the community service. So that was another episode of HUNKS Talking Junk, leadership, branding, and culture. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, share, like. Make sure you spread the good word, and we'll talk to you soon on another episode.